What's going on, guys? Dare here with Fantasy Football Advice, coming at you with another fantasy football video. Today, we got a good one for you guys. In today's video, we're going to be going over 5 players that have elite production upside. What do I mean by that? Well, these are going to be players that aren't drafted in the first round, but can compete with some of those top 5 guys. And it's good to understand the types of players that these are and where they're falling in drafts. So if you end up looking at your roster while you're in the middle of your own draft and realize, hey, maybe I'm lacking some upside. Well, if you find yourself in that type of situation in the draft, then these are going to be the type of players you're going to want to target. Before we do get into exactly who those players are, just a quick shout out and a reminder that if you do enjoy the videos we're putting out, the best way to show your support is by hitting that like button. It just takes a moment for you, but greatly helps us out in growing the channel, so it's very much appreciated. And with our goal being 100k subscribers by the start of the NFL season, every like, every subscriber, they're all extremely important. So if you also happen to be somebody who may be watching our content regularly, we are posting 11 videos per week. Maybe you aren't yet subscribed, consider taking today as an opportunity to do so. Also, guys, this video is slated to be released on July 18th. That means fantasy drafts are a little bit over a month away. The crunch time to prepare for our drafts is coming before you know it. So if you're somebody out there who wants to take your league more serious this year, maybe you're overall just getting a late start to your research process, consider signing up for our draft package. This season, we put together our best possible package we've ever offered. We've added things while also simplifying it, making it easier to digest. There isn't just useless stuff thrown in there to make it seem like it's a better value. No, everything that you get is going to directly benefit you and your fantasy draft. But hey, don't just take our word for it. Go to our website, check out some testimonials. While you're there, explore the site, check out some of our free tools available for even non-members, like our ADP value versus platform charts, or our trending players section, which goes over the latest news and notes, saving you time by keeping you updated without having to do any of the work, because we're going to do it for you. That's at our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. Link, as always, in the description box below. With that being said, let's hop over to our stat of the day. Yesterday's stat of the day was among all games where a running back had at least 25 carries last season, which running back had the best game in terms of yards per carry? The correct answer was actually Jonathan Taylor. Congratulations to Connor McLeod, the first to get this right on YouTube, and as for Twitter, at the Lord of Meese. You guys are completely killing it this week, but let's see who can get today's question correct. In 2020, Kelsey, Kittle, and Waller were the top 3 tight ends in terms of receiving yardage through the first 8 weeks of the season. Which tight end ranked 4th right behind them? Leave your answer in the comment section down below. We'll be happy to let you know who wins in tomorrow's video. Without further ado though, let's hop right into the top 5 players with elite production upside. We'll begin as per usual with the player on the thumbnail, a player that I have not brought up yet so far this offseason on video. To my knowledge, I don't believe Nick has either, so pretty pumped to bring this one to you. It's Cooper Kupp of the LA Rams. While we may not have had the privilege to go over Cooper Kupp in a video so far this offseason, you already know exactly how we stand on the LA Rams offense heading into 2021. For those of you newer viewers though, we're completely buying in. Cam Akers, Robert Woods, the newly acquired Matthew Stafford, who's a significant upgrade at the quarterback position over the previous quarterback Jared Goff, having the ability to combine all of those consistent offensive weapons with Sean McVay, who's an offensive guru himself, and you have a team that's loaded with upside, and realistically, no matter which piece you pick in this LA Rams offense, you're unlikely to be disappointed. Even looking at the deeper stages of the draft where Tyler Higbee falls, comparing him to the other tight ends in that range, it's difficult to make a case against him. Looking back even further, you have Darrell Henderson serving as the change of pace back, the main receiving back in this offense, and he's likely a player who could have some startability in a plus matchup, but he's going to also have the added benefit of being a handcuff to Cam Akers. So anywhere you look at it, if they're attached to the LA Rams offense for fantasy football, I want a piece of it. The funny part is though, each player that I listed up to this point, we've already broken down in a previous video. The only one who has been evading us, Cooper Kupp. Some of you out there may be wondering, how exactly high are we on Cooper Kupp? How do we compare him to Robert Woods this season? Kupp and Woods have been a duo in fantasy drafts that have kind of yo-yoed when it comes to their ADP and which player is going to be worth more, which player gets drafted earlier. This season though, Robert Woods seems to be taking the cake with the highest ADP and draft cost. Currently that cost is the wide receiver 16. That's actually the same spot we have him ranked, so not coming in as an incredible value. As for Cooper Kupp though, this is a player that you can get significantly cheaper in drafts. We're talking a back-end wide receiver 2 here. You'll find him most expensive on the Underdog platform, coming in as the wide receiver 21, being drafted 61st overall. Shouldn't surprise any of us that a best ball format is the format that he costs the most in, because Cooper Kupp, as the title of this video states, he's a player that has an immense amount of upside. For those of you strict redraft players only who may not dabble into best ball leagues, the reason that we're looking for high weekly upside in a best ball format is because once you finish your draft before the season starts, you make absolutely no roster moves throughout the season, no starts and sits either. Your weekly roster is constructed based off of all of the players you drafted at each position, taking the highest weekly performers at each position. The overall roster and bench is much deeper, so the overall strategy is best to stack as many high upside players with a high weekly ceiling as you can. On the flip side, the high floor players that are putting up 10 to 12 points a week, those players are much less valuable, because 10 to 12 points when you have such a deep roster, odds are somebody on your bench is just likely to outscore them. If you guys did want to give best ball a try, definitely do that on the Underdog platform. We have a promo code FFA which will give you a $25 credit upon your deposit. But back to redraft leagues and Cooper Kupp specifically, why he's coming in so cheap outside of the top 20 wide receivers is largely on the back of his poor 2020 season. In 2020, he finished as the wide receiver 26 on the back of 124 targets, 92 receptions, 974 receiving yards to go along with 3 receiving touchdowns. For most players, a wide receiver 26 finish would not be too disappointing, especially considering the fact that he got 124 targets on the season, a target share that was good to rank 16th among all wide receivers. On top of that, he did appear in 15 games, so while he was banged up due to injuries, and while his health did take a toll on his overall production and efficiency, he still was able to appear in 15 games. So although Cooper Kupp put in what was considered a disappointing fantasy season, there were still some things we could look at as a positive amongst the negative. It's not as if the LA Rams offense was firing on all cylinders and Cooper Kupp was the lone player disappointing. No, the LA Rams offense was uncharacteristically struggling to keep drives alive and get in scoring range, and Cooper Kupp, unlike Robert Woods, is a player that does rely on touchdowns in order to make up most of his fantasy production. Robert Woods can finish a season with 3 receiving touchdowns, and that's just normal for him. Cooper Kupp, he scored double-digit targets last season. The LA Rams offense, typically an offense we can expect to rank top 10, push for top 5, even top 3. Last season, it may surprise you to hear, they actually ranked 22nd in the area of points per game. With less scoring opportunities and red zone drives, Cooper Kupp didn't really get to play on the area of the field where he performs his best. And while I'm not trying to make excuses for him this season, the point I'm trying to make is that heading into 2021, the concerns for the offense really should be null and void. So for any of you out there expecting a repeat performance from Cooper Kupp, I'd strongly bet against that. Cooper Kupp is much more likely to score in the range of what he did in the 2019 season, where he put together his best season as a pro. From a volume perspective, we didn't see much difference from 2020 and 2019. 124 targets versus 134, definitely not the difference from his wide receiver 26 finish and what he did in 2019. 1,101 receiving yards, compare that to his 974 in 2020. In that massive gap, that massive discrepancy I was talking about, 10 receiving touchdowns in 2019, compare that to his measly 3 touchdowns in 2020. Anybody questioning or doubting if Cooper Kupp deserves to be on this elite production list should definitely look towards those 2019 numbers, because in that season he actually finished as a top 5 wide receiver, and believe it or not, his top 5 finish was actually not the first time that he completed that. While he didn't finish the 2018 season as a top 5 wide receiver, if we're looking in the area of fantasy points per game, Cooper Kupp was on pace and actually exceeding his fantasy production from 2020 in the 8 games he played in 2019. Strong performances, though, are no stranger to Cooper Kupp. Kupp's been fantasy relevant dating all the way back to his rookie season, so realistically we're looking at 3 successful seasons out of 4, 2 of them where he was averaging top 5 numbers. Then we have his rookie season where as a rookie he finished as the wide receiver 25, then in 2020 finishing as the wide receiver 26, and so far throughout his career he's basically had a 50-50 shot of being an elite wide receiver option, or in a worst case scenario being a wide receiver who's going to finish virtually at the same spot where he's going in the 2021 fantasy fantasy draft. That all adds up to a player that's likely being drafted at his floor that leaves open a ton of room for upside, and with Cooper Kupp being a player who's already displayed that upside, this does make him one of the safer high upside picks that you're able to get in this stage of the draft, somebody that I think has a very easy shot at hitting his ceiling, especially with the upgrade at quarterback with Matthew Stafford. While there may be some bumps in the road at the early portion of the season as they all get accustomed to playing with one another, by the time it really matters, the fantasy playoffs, this offense should be firing on all cylinders. I do apologize for that extremely long take of Cooper Kupp. As I had mentioned, we haven't really brought him up too much in previous videos or breakdowns, so we'll move right into the next player, a bit more risky, a bit more unproven, but certainly brings in an undeniable amount of upside. This player is Diontae Johnson of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Making the case for Diontae Johnson is pretty easy, but making a case against him is equally as easy. For him, in 2020, as a sophomore, in just 15 games, he finished as the wide receiver 21. The most impressive part about his 2020 sophomore season was the fact that he received an incredible amount of volume. We're talking 144 targets, a mark when compared to all other players in the league. Diontae Johnson actually ranked 6th in that category, and although he didn't really make the most of it, finishing as the wide receiver 21 on the 6th most targets in the league, his 2020 season was very telling on the pecking order when it comes to targets in this Pittsburgh Steelers offense. Clearly, Diontae Johnson is the top option, and being a top option in a Pittsburgh Steelers offense presents an incredible amount of upside. Johnson in 2020 may not have had the tools and ability to capitalize on all of those targets in 2020. His 144 targets were actually converted into just 88 receptions, a mere 923 yards, so 6th in targets, 13th in receptions, and just 25th in receiving yards. That right there screams to us exactly how much room for growth there is. Not only was he inefficient at translating targets to receptions to receiving yardage, but he also ranked 1st in drops, coming in with 11. Heading into the 2021 season, it should be pretty easy to perform better and more efficiently than he did in 2020. The main concern with Diontae Johnson and the case against him does lie on the back of Big Ben and the fact that they drafted Najee Harris in the 1st round, while the Pittsburgh Steelers ranked 2nd in pass plays per game in 2020. Heading into 2021, that's all but guaranteed. What we do know about this offense, though, is that they do have a subpar offensive line that does have the potential to have a negative impact on the run game. So as much as they want to run the ball, we don't know exactly how efficient they will be. It's one of the biggest knocks that people have on Najee Harris, myself included. So if I'm predicting the most likely outcome for this Pittsburgh Steelers offense, I do expect it to be an offense that does try to rely less on Big Ben, more on Najee Harris. And while I don't believe all of that is going to come through rush attempts on the ground behind this poor offensive line, I do see Najee Harris being heavily involved in the receiving game. And if Najee Harris ultimately is as inefficient as a lot of people out there believe he could be, the Pittsburgh Steelers, no matter how much they may want the ball out of Big Ben's hands, they may just simply not have that luxury. The Steelers are in a division with Cleveland, Baltimore, Cincinnati, 3 teams that definitely have shootout potential written all over them. Diontae Johnson's going to be no stranger to these high upside, high ceiling games, the types of games where Diontae Johnson is in line for double-digit targets. In 2020, 10 of his 15 games actually came on the back of 10 targets. And although Diontae Johnson may have a more difficult time hitting his ceiling when compared to a player like Cooper Kupp, the price to get him is actually cheaper. The volume and expected volume for Diontae Johnson is actually higher, and cleaning up the 11 drops should be pretty easy. Having a full season playing with a healthy Big Ben, that did help improve their chemistry, something that they're going to have as an added benefit heading into 2021 that they didn't have in 2020. And although wide receivers are generally breaking out at an earlier age, and Diontae Johnson should already be considered a player who has already haven't broken out, we still can't discredit the fact that Johnson is heading into his 3rd season, typically known as the breakout year for wide receivers. So regardless of whether he's broken out in the past or not, heading into his 3rd season, we should expect a significant amount of improvement. The historical data does support it, and with him coming off the board as the wide receiver 25, if you're in the draft and maybe you didn't capture enough upside in the earlier rounds, maybe you drafted somebody like Robert Woods, Diontae Johnson is the perfect wide receiver to target that has undeniable elite production upside. Alright guys, we've gone through 2 wide receivers, so it's about time that we touched on a running back. And as you know, with the running back position being in extremely high demand, it's difficult to discuss a running back that's not being drafted within the first 2 rounds. This running back that I'm bringing up is being drafted in that range. It's Austin Ekeler of the LA Chargers. One thing we know about the running back position as a whole is that when it comes to the running backs that are able to finish as the top 5 at the position, not only do you need to perform extremely well and get some touchdown variance in your favor. It also requires a formula where you need to have plenty of scoring opportunities, also have heavy involvement in the receiving game. So many running backs, strictly due to just being in the offense that they are, or being limited to the role, or having another running back within their offense that may play more of the receiving role. Due to all of these hefty requirements, not every running back, even if many things go their way, has even the potential to finish as a top 5 running back for fantasy football. It almost appears as if the stars have to align, and on top of that, you have to remain healthy. Health was something Austin Ekeler did not have in 2020, and in that season, he did appear in just 10 games, had 106 carries on the ground, 530 rushing yards, 65 targets, 54 receptions, 403 receiving yards to go along with 3 total touchdowns. Due to him having only a 10-game sample as the full-time starter, it does make it difficult to know what exactly we would have expected from Austin Ekeler had he been healthy and played for the entire season. If we take Austin Ekeler's 10-game pace, spread it across a 16-game season, his numbers are actually pretty impressive. We're talking 1,493 yards from scrimmage, heavy involvement in the receiving game, we're talking over 100 targets, and with Ekeler being one of the most premier receiving backs in the league, his catch rate, phenomenal, 86 receptions. The only real area where he did struggle when compared to previous seasons wasn't in his efficiency, wasn't in his opportunity, it was in the area of touchdowns. In 2020, Austin Ekeler was only able to score 3 different times. If I had the choice of my running back struggling in any area the year before, touchdowns would always be the choice I take. As we know, touchdowns are the highest variance stat whenever we compare a single player production season over season. The term touchdowns are fluky, it's not a joke. As we saw with Cooper Kupp, a perennial double-digit target player, he was on pace for double-digit targets in 2018, received double-digit targets in 2019, then all of a sudden, a fluky season the following year, 2020, 3 receiving touchdowns for Cooper, a disappointing fantasy season, and ultimately his ADP fell as a result. The most important question, though, we have to ask ourselves about Austin Ekeler is whether we can expect more touchdowns this season or a repeat of what we got in 2020. If I'm taking bets, I'm certainly leaning on the side of positive touchdown regression for Austin Ekeler, and there are a few reasons why. For starters, Justin Herbert, he's a complete stud. I fully believe in him. Last season, they were heading into this season with Tyrod Taylor as the starting quarterback, the same type of optimism the Houston Texans currently have with their offense. And after seeing a full season of Justin Herbert leading this LA Chargers team, it provides a lot of optimism for this offense moving forward. I have absolutely no concern of Justin Herbert being able to put this team in scoring position frequently. He already proved to be able to do that as just a rookie, learning the game speed of the NFL, learning the offense, getting accustomed to the players and building chemistry. Heading into year 2, he will already have all of those factors to his advantage, and on top of that, historically the quarterback position is one that takes the most significant step forward from year 1 to year 2. Those would be lofty expectations for Justin Herbert considering his rookie season went so well, but it wouldn't be unrealistic to expect him to have a similar type of output or expectation put upon him. On top of that, Austin Ekeler was able to score 11 times with Phillip Rivers as the quarterback. Not only just Phillip Rivers as the quarterback, but also splitting carries and touches with Melvin Gordon. That means his 11 touchdown ceiling that we've previously seen from Ekeler, theoretically it could go even higher than there. Without Melvin Gordon in the first 4 games of last season, Austin Ekeler scored a whopping 6 touchdowns. Imagine he brings that type of touchdown pace into the 2021 season. Austin Ekeler could be the type of running back that's looked at as a league winner. The final thing we have to ask ourselves is if he will have involvement in the red zone. I fully expect Austin Ekeler to have a featured role in the red zone. With the lack of talent at the running back position that we saw in the 6 games that Austin Ekeler was injured, it gives me little to no confidence in the other running backs in this backfield, presumably taking over snaps from him, especially in the most important area of the field. And when you consider how much success that Austin Ekeler had in 2019 when being the featured weapon in that area, it would be almost foolish to expect any of those other running backs to steal snaps from him, because it's not like the Chargers offense is overall loaded with talent. Yes, they have Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, but outside of Keenan Allen, the other receiving weapons don't play all that consistently. Keenan Allen himself is not a superior red zone weapon. Then the fact that this offense also lost Hunter Henry, a big body target looked for in the red zone. So heading into 2021, there is going to be a massive opportunity open that Justin Herbert will be looking to fill. And with Austin Ekeler being one of the most talented players on this team, a proven performer, a consistent performer with sure hands, it would be foolish to expect anything less than Austin Ekeler being featured in the red zone, an area where he's already proved to have a ton of success success earlier in his career. Overall, Austin Ekeler's a player with a high receiving floor that you can expect 100 plus targets in a 16-game season. We've seen in short spurts earlier in his career that he's able to score touchdowns at an incredible rate, 6 touchdowns in a mere 4 games, and with Hunter Henry no longer on the roster, a lack of talent at the running back position behind him, the likeliness of Austin Ekeler hitting his ceiling, it's not as far-fetched as many people out there believe. Alright guys, we're moving into the next player, and this one's probably the biggest curveball on this list. It's TJ Hockenson of the Detroit Lions. TJ Hockenson is a tight end heading into his 3rd professional season, coming off of what could be considered a mini breakout of his own. In 2020, he finished as the tight end 5. That was on the back of 101 targets, 67 receptions, 723 receiving yards to go along with 6 touchdowns. The scarcity of the tight end position can be highlighted, especially with TJ Hockenson's 2020 season. A top 5 finish at his position despite only receiving just over 700 yards, only 6 receiving touchdowns. Overall, that just goes to show you exactly how scarce the position is. And even if in 2021 TJ Hockenson were to once again finish as the TE5 and put up similar numbers, we're talking mid 700 receiving yards, 5 to 7 touchdowns, I would not consider that TJ Hockenson hitting his upside, nor would I consider that elite production. My take on TJ Hockenson in his potential to take a step forward definitely comes on the back of the need at the receiver position for the Detroit Lions heading into the 2021 season. As we know, there's no longer Kenny Golladay on the roster. He exited to free agency, signed by the New York Giants. If that wasn't bad enough though, their other most senior wide receiver, Marvin Jones, he's now a Jacksonville Jaguar. But if that couldn't be bad enough for this offense, on top of that, they also lost Matthew Stafford, trading him to the LA Rams in exchange for Jared Goff. While Jared Goff is a much younger quarterback with a longer future ahead of him, presumably, one thing we know for sure is, at least at this point in their careers, Matthew Stafford is a much stronger passer, makes much better decisions, he's a much better game manager. It's hard to find an area where Jared Goff is a better quarterback than Matthew Stafford, which overall doesn't give us much high expectations for Detroit heading into 2021. In a perfect world, it would have been nice for Hockenson's value to have Kenny Golladay and Marvin Jones still exit, yet keep Matthew Stafford as the starting quarterback in Detroit, because we've already seen Hockenson develop a chemistry with Stafford in his first 2 years in the NFL. It was positive to see Hockenson take such a stride forward from year 1 to year 2. Typically, the tight end position is one that does take much more time to develop. Even putting up the numbers that he did in his 2nd year in the NFL is extremely impressive when compared to other tight ends at the position, because sometimes we don't see tight ends put up starting level production for fantasy until year 3, 4, and beyond. Hockenson himself made a massive leap going from the TE31 to the TE5. Not a surprising outcome. We were very high on him throughout this offseason, being one of the better late round tight end targets. The dude stands 6'5", 251 pounds. He runs a 4.7 40, which may not sound all that fast, but at his size, that is in the 74th percentile. He's an exceptional athlete in every other category. We're talking 76th percentile height adjusted speed score, 90th percentile burst score, which we see have a heavy translation at tight end and running back, but it doesn't just end there. 98th percentile agility score. So to suggest that his 2020 breakout came from left field would just be an incorrect statement. Heading into 2021 though, the case for him is pretty simple. This team is just severely lacking weapons offensively, especially in the passing game. It's one of the reasons that a running back like DeAndre Swift can rank so highly in fantasy drafts. As we know, the running back position is typically heavily tied to offensive success, positive game scripts. Neither of those things can we reasonably expect from Swift, but despite that, he's still going to be ranking high on fantasy boards just due to necessity on the team. Hockenson, just like Swift, should be heavily involved in the receiving game. At this point, we really don't have an idea of exactly how the target distribution is going to work across the entire team, but what we do know is that both Swift and Hockenson are talented receivers. So far, the most talented receivers that we are aware of. We will wait for the wide receiver position to develop itself, but there is a legitimate chance out there for Hockenson to lead this team from a target perspective. Hockenson finishing the season with 120 plus targets is not an unrealistic expectation. The quality of those targets may not be as high. We may not see him convert with as much efficiency as he did with Matthew Stafford, but one thing that we do know is that the Detroit Lions also have a very poor defense, so plenty of garbage time opportunities available for this Detroit Lions offense. And even if Jared Goff is bad, that's still going to be okay for fantasy football. And we saw a similar situation last season when Dak Prescott went down for the Dallas Cowboys, and despite that, we still saw plenty of production for the receiving weapons in that offense, including 2 wide receivers finishing inside the top 25, Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb. Alright guys, we're moving into the final player, and I definitely saved the best for last. One of my favorite players to draft over the past 2 seasons. I'm certainly going to own many shares of him in 2021. The player I'm talking about is Terry McLaurin of the Washington football team. While some people out there will be quick to say that Terry McLaurin is a layup when it comes to predicting a player with elite production upside, and while I do agree he's not the boldest take on this list, one thing we have to understand is that Terry McLaurin has never had a season where he's finished higher than the wide receiver 20. The Washington football team is also a team that's been known for low production offense, using their defense to win games, focusing more on the run, limiting mistakes, and all three of those combined for a less than ideal situation for a fantasy wide receiver. Ultimately, that's why Terry McLaurin, one of the more talented wide receivers, has not had a higher fantasy finish. That's not to say that he's not talented enough to do so. I certainly believe this is going to be his year. And no, it's not just because third time's a charm. There are changes to this offense which are going to definitely benefit him. For starters, the change in quarterback. Few quarterbacks in the entire league boost the production of a single position more than Ryan Fitzpatrick boosts wide receivers throughout his entire career. This is a significant reason for many people to be lower on Logan Thomas, a tight end who finished as the TE3 in 2020, but the presumed loss of Logan Thomas in 2021 is only the gain of Terry McLaurin for 2020. In addition to Ryan Fitzpatrick's tendency to target the wide receiver position at a higher rate than any other position, that is simply a bonus to the fact that he is simply an upgrade over the previous quarterback situation they faced last season. Ryan Fitzpatrick could realistically target all positions equally to the league average and still be an upgrade. So for Terry McLaurin to get the best of both worlds, getting an upgrade in accuracy, volume, risk taking, but also presumably getting an upgrade in targets, all of that adds up to the potential of Terry McLaurin, if he does hit his ceiling, to have just a phenomenal season. We're talking a player who could potentially hit top 5. Ryan Fitzpatrick historically has already supported those types of receivers. Think Brandon Marshall back on the Jets, DeAndre Hopkins on the Texans, Mike Evans had a wide receiver one season, Devontae Parker came out of nowhere. There are no shortage of examples of where Ryan Fitzpatrick made stars out of players who are already established, and that's exactly what he's getting with Terry McLaurin heading into 2021. That right there would be enough to make a strong case for Terry McLaurin to crack the top 10 this season, potentially have that top 5 upside, but on top of that, there are even more reasons to love him, including the fact that they bolstered up this wide receiver position, adding Curtis Samuel of the Carolina Panthers. Curtis Samuel is a player I like drafting in the later stages of fantasy drafts, but regardless of what he does as an individual producer, what he does for Terry McLaurin is assist this team in having sustained drives. It wouldn't matter how good Terry McLaurin is, if he's the only competent receiver on that offense, ultimately that's going to lead to limited scoring opportunities. We saw last season, out of necessity, Logan Thomas was heavily targeted. In a perfect world, Logan Thomas, a tight end who had bounced around the leagues and been largely unproven before making his way to the Washington football team, do you really think they would have expected him to break up and have such a significant role? If the Washington football team had other options that were capable, that would not have been a thing. Also, think J.D. McKissic, the running back who also received over 100 targets. Very few running backs did that in 2020. J.D. McKissic was one of them. Having Curtis Samuel, a wide receiver who can line up in many different positions, frees and opens up the offense to allow Antonio Gibson to play on more snaps, keeping J.D. McKissic off of the field, allowing Antonio Gibson, a big play threat himself, to do a ton of damage, very similar to what we saw last season, but with much more upside this year. If the offense is firing on all cylinders, or at least when compared to 2020, Antonio Gibson is going to have a much more easy time finding success, something he really wasn't struggling with all that much in 2020. The result, more scoring opportunities for this offense as a whole. So if Terry McLaurin can capitalize on all of those things, translating those scoring opportunities into touchdowns, something we've seen him do very successfully in his rookie season, on top of the potential of him making the most of the upgrade at the quarterback position, moving to Ryan Fitzpatrick, something many other receivers throughout history have done themselves, many less talented receivers, and then lastly, having the bolstered up weapons within the receiving game, having an offense that's more dynamic with more options to spread the ball around with a well-coached team by Ron Rivera. Overall, this will lead to more sustained drives, more volume for Terry McLaurin, and if he's able to compile and put all of those things together, there's no doubt in my mind Terry McLaurin couldn't finish as a top 5 wide receiver heading into this year with undeniable elite production upside. But guys, that's going to do it for this video. We really hope you enjoyed. If you did, how about hitting that like button? If you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button. Thank you all for watching. We'll catch you on the next one.